Iquitos. A religious family like that of Joam Garral's had availed themselves enthusiastically of this occasion of taking him with them. Padre Passanha, then aged 70, was a man of great worth, full of evangelical fervor, charitable and good, and in countries where the representatives of religion are not always examples of the virtues, he stood out as the accomplished type of those great missionaries who have done so much for civilization in the interior of the most savage regions of the world. For 50 years, Padre Passanha had lived at Iquitos, in the mission of which he was the chief. He was loved by all, and worthily so. The Garral family held him in great esteem. It was he who had married the daughter of Farmer Magalhaes to the clerk who had been received at the fazenda. He had known the children from birth, he had baptized them, educated them, and hoped to give each of them the nuptial blessing. The age of the padre did not allow of his exercising his important ministry any longer. The horn of retreat for him had sounded. He was about to be replaced at Iquitos by a younger missionary, and he was preparing to return to Para, to end his days in one of those convents which are reserved for the old servants of God. What better occasion could offer than that of descending the river with the family which was as his own? They had proposed it to him, and he had accepted, and when arrived at Belem, he was to marry the young couple, Mina and Manuel. But if Padre Passanha, during the course of the voyage, was to take his meals with the family, Joam Garral desired to build for him a dwelling apart, and heaven knows what care Yaquita and her daughter took to make him comfortable. Assuredly the good old priest had never been so lodged in his modest parsonage. The parsonage was not enough for Padre Passanha. He ought to have a chapel. The chapel then was built in the center of the jangada, and a little bell surmounted it. It was small enough, undoubtedly, and it could not hold the whole of the crew, but it was richly decorated, and if Joam Garral found his own house on the raft, Padre Passanha had no cause to regret the poverty-stricken churches of Iquitos. Such was the wonderful structure which was going down the Amazon. It was then on the bank waiting till the flood came to carry it away. From the observation and calculation of the rising, it would seem as though there was not much longer to wait. All was ready to date, the 5th of June. The pilot arrived the evening before. He was a man about 50, well up in his profession, but rather fond of drink. Such as he was, Joam Garral in large matters at different times had employed him to take his rafts to Belem, and he had never had cause to repent it. It is well to add that Araujo, that was his name, never saw better than when he had imbibed a few glasses of tafia, and he never did any work at all without a certain demijohn of that liquor to which he paid frequent court. The rise of the flood had clearly manifested itself for several days. From minute to minute the level of the river rose, and during the 24 hours which preceded the maximum, the waters covered the bank on which the raft rested, but did not lift the raft. As soon as the movement was assured, and there could be no error as to the height to which the flood would rise, all those interested in the undertaking were seized with no little excitement. For if through some inexplicable cause the waters of the Amazon did not rise sufficiently to flood the jangada, it would all have to be built over again. But as the fall of the river would be very rapid, it would take long months before similar conditions recurred. On the 5th of June, toward the evening, the future passengers of the jangada were collected on a plateau which was about 100 feet above the bank, and waited for the hour with an anxiety quite intelligible. There were Yaquita, her daughter Manuel Valdez, Padre Passanha, Benito, Lina, Fragosa, Sibella, and some of the servants, Indian or Negro, of the fazenda. Fragoso could not keep himself still. He went and he came. He ran down the bank and ran up the plateau. He noted the points of the river gauge and shouted hurrah as the water crept up. "It will swim! It will swim!" he shouted. "The raft which is to take us to Belem, it will float if all the cataracts of the sky have to open to flood the Amazon." Joam Garral was on the raft with the pilot and some of the crew. It was for him to take all necessary measures at the critical moment. The jangada was moored to the bank with solid cables, so that it could not be carried away by the current when it floated off. Quite a tribe, from 150 to 200 Indians, without counting the population of the village, had come to assist at the interesting spectacle. They were all keenly on the watch, and silence reigned over the impressionable crowd. Toward 5 o'clock in the evening, The water had reached a level higher than that of the night before, by more than a foot, and the bank had already entirely disappeared beneath the liquid covering. A certain groaning arose among the planks of the enormous structure, but there was still wanting a few inches before it was quite lifted and detached from the ground. For an hour the groanings increased. The joists grated on all sides. A struggle was going on in which little by little the trunks were being dragged from their sandy bed. Toward 6:30 cries of joy arose. The jangada floated at last, and the current took it towards the middle of the river, but in obedience to the cables it quietly took up its position near the bank at the moment that Padre Passanha gave it his blessing, as if it were a vessel launched into the sea whose destinies are in the hands of the Most High. End of Chapter 9. The evening of the 5th of June.